What John Hughes, he had his pulse on adolescence, in general. He had a really good sense of it. There was always this feeling that John never really grew up, that he was one of those characters who he still could think like a teenager. He remembered what it was like to be a teenager. He knew that when you're an adolescent, the world is so centered around what you're going through and everything filters through that. I mean, these are all things that you can go to be clinical about, but he wasn't clinical about it. You always felt like he lived it.
I think that John, because of his work in Lampoon and because of his sort of vivid imagination and writing style, was not too far apart emotionally from the teenage years, and there were things that had happened to him that he had remembered. So whether he had a pulse on teens at that time, he had a pulse on teens of his generation, and he spoke to some sort of truth.
My experience of John is that he was very open when we did Breakfast Club. He is very sensitive, very funny, really excited about making his movie, and not a person who's cut off from how he feels about anything. Just, sort of delighted by everything.
I just don't feel that there are a lot of filmmakers out there with the same affection for youth culture that John Hughes clearly had.
John probably felt that he was maybe sick of the term kids movie being a negative term. Meaning, if it's a kids movie, then it can't really be about anything. Then it will be frivolous. Whereas I think we all remember some of our most serious times in our lives have been in high school when you look back and you go, what an idiot. But it's like things were very serious, things that were of great concern to you in high school.
I don't think anybody can copy him, is what the problem is. He's just so original and pulling the people in and his ideas. And I know that there were lots and lots of movies and television shows about the kids in high school, the group in high school, but I don't think anybody can quite get that particular style that he has and that he always had. So, what are you going to do? There's only him.
I think John's narrative voice took everything in another direction because he had a great ear for dialogue, for talent, for character, for everything. He was able to sort of see it all and put it all together.
He must have known that he had essential stories to tell about high school. And he must have been so aware of the moment that he was living in, the mid-1980s, because every detail in his movies, even now, looks right. It's like going through your yearbook. And I think that's why kids my age loved those movies so much, was because I remember when The Breakfast Club came out and I was a junior in high school, it just seemed like finally someone made a movie about what I think about and how I feel.
I remember at the time, part of the myth of John Hughes that we all knew about as young filmmakers was he sat at a desk and he played all this great music all the time, and that, the music was a big part of what he did, and that was his sensibilities. Now, I have no idea if there's any truth to that. I have no idea whatsoever, but that's what we all believed.
The way John does things, it's like he pin drops sounds and he pin drops attitudes. That's how he makes his films, which is highly unusual because he's on the pulse of something.
He had his ear to the curb, so to speak, in terms of music. Yeah, he always sort of integrated that into the writing and also the producing of the films.
It's the way the songs were juxtaposed with the scenes that made them effective. I mean, the songs themselves are not super cutting edge, but they're used so well. They're not just dropped in there. The timing is always impeccable. And I always appreciated that there was the David Bowie quote at the beginning of The Breakfast Club, even though I don't believe we actually hear that song, Changes. It's such a great quote.
My proudest thing about Breakfast Club, it's more than anything, performances or characters or anything else. That David Bowie quote was mine. I found that David Bowie quote in the beginning of the movie, and I showed it to John, and he thought it was great, and then he never said another word about it, and I saw the movie for the first time, and there it is, like right in the front of the movie. That's my proudest moment.
And Don't You Forget About Me is amazing, because it's just this soaring anthem, and you get that sense of triumph at the end of the movie with Bender, pumping his fist in the air. And if you think about it, it was just a movie about a Saturday spent in detention, and yet you feel like some kind of battle has been won. That's effective use of music.
Yeah, that song, I can't believe it. That song is still, it's around all the time.
It's funny when you see a new generation discovering things that are so familiar. Have you heard this amazing song by Simple Minds? Yes. Yes, I have.
Hughes wrote a great script. It's not like he's precious about each word. He's precious about his own sense of truth.
I think he said that he had written Breakfast Club a long, long, long time before. and he had it in the drawer or something.
You know, in the industry, it's called a talking heads movie, where people, you know, there formerly had been films like My Dinner with Andre, or, you know, maybe European films where it's so simplified. But with that, it was really like filming a play.
John said something like that he wrote the first draft in a weekend. And both Emilio and I, it was almost simultaneously. I was like, first draft, okay, how many drafts do you have? And Hughes said, well, I got a few. Why? Emilio and I were like, can we read them? This is during the rehearsal process. So he's like, sure, hey. So we read them. I was like, John, so how about if we put this? He was like, sure, let's try it.
John was awesome about making sure we had rehearsal time, which is like a foregone conclusion these days. You don't have that. You just show up on the set, you know, where's my trailer, where's my makeup? But with that, we rehearsed it. We really sat, just the 6 of us in a room, while the sets were still being finished and made. And, you know, we all had a lot of time to talk about it and share our insights about what we were going to do and how it could play out. But the rehearsal was key.
Yeah, I really thought that's how they made movies. It certainly is the best way to go about making a good movie, I think, is when everyone's on the same page and confident and ready.
He just wanted everybody to come in, you know, with their character and start playing around. That's how he shot it. I mean, he was so open to anything that anybody brought in or anything that happened in the scene, you know, any riff that you do off his writing. He wasn't precious about anything.
You want to see a picture of a guy with elephantitis of the nuts?
Elephantitis of the nuts or whatever. Judd came up. I don't know where that came from.
John let us have 5, 6 takes. I mean, his shooting ratio is pretty high, I think. And then he would let us go off, and occasionally what went off would be used. There was a lot more improvisation.
We had a script supervisor, Bob Forrest, I think his name was. How you doing, Bob, if you're out there? I think Bob came out, he was cajoled out of retirement to do The Breakfast Club. And shortly after the completion of Breakfast Club, he for sure retired.
Mole really pumps my nads.
Well, yeah.
He stopped taking notes and brought in a little tape recorder that he would like turn on, because Hughes would put that 1,500-foot mag on the camera. And like that stuff like Anthony Michael Hall, it's just genius of him when he's getting stoned and, you know, chicks, they can't hold a smoke. And he's like, it's going on. And we did a few takes of it and he's literally going on and on. You can hear eventually the click, click, click of the film in the mag because it's run out and it's just going around. We're all aware of it. It's not like Hughes doesn't know what that sound is, but we're going to watch Michael for a while. Why not? He's great.
Chicks cannot hold their smoke. That's what it is.
It's hard to try and recreate teen speak when you're not a teenager. It is, and it's hard to make it sound authentic. And I don't think there's a false note in terms of the vernacular in any of John Hughes' films.
Can you hear this? You want me to turn it up?
I think a lot of it he made up. Like in Breakfast Club, like what does he call the guy? Like a Magna Zoom dweeby or something? I don't think that was a pre-existing insult. But it's so awesome, and people remember it.
Face it, you're a neo-maxi zoom dweeby.
Neo-maxi Zoom dweeby.
Just in terms of telling the story of these 5 specific stereotypes, what worked is no matter who you were, you can put yourself in one of those boxes. So that made, right from the start, it makes the film very relatable.
Everybody's gone to high school. So there's a good chance that you're going to reach a very big audience because everybody knows what you're talking about.
He's just able to pull it out and not be trite about it or not be overly simple about it. They're complicated, all his characters. All of them, actually. Even in the really broad comedies, they're complicated.
It's John's heart. It's just awesome. I think that it's demonstrated by all of the characters in all of his films.
It just kind of opened up those doors and said, you know, these stereotypes are there because kids in general need a place to hide when you're in high school. And you sort of hide in your little box.
People can relate to being marginalized in whatever way, in a relationship, in a family, at home, because of their ethnicity, whatever. You know? And I think what's interesting is the film dares to kind of attack that in a way by using these characters. So it was a brilliant idea.
Those little moments where you see where these kids are coming from, where they've already had to put on their armor, and just the way the car drives away from Allie and on the whole thing, you know, it's very subtle at the beginning. It gives us a nice setup to those guys. And the fact that Bender has no parent, that he's just walking on his own. I mean, I think that those are really good setups. I think that the kids have a lot of armor that they slowly take off during the film.
That was the biggest challenge, is having them arrive at school with their coats and giving them their ID, so to speak. You already get a feeling of what you're dealing with these guys.
Marilyn Vansky had these boards. They're like vision boards, basically, that somebody will make with, ideas for different characters and cutouts from magazines. And she just had, Allison was all over it. It was just fantastic.
That was to John's direction, because when you're sitting in a space for a long time and you're just looking at each other and you're in a room of strangers and you start, the air gets tight and you get all those feelings and suddenly one's taking off the coat and, you're kind of adjusting to your atmosphere. And that's the progression.
That's the genius of these films, is that the level of the young characters and the older characters, they are not caricatured even when they're played as character types. And that's why John Hughes was a far better writer doing that sort of material than anybody else.
When The Breakfast Club came up and we had shot 16 Candles, I remember John called me and he then told me about the premise and the whole thing. And I remember him pointing out the details of that character and how it would be different. He's more introverted, quiet, little shy guy that ultimately becomes the voice for the group. He writes the letter and the whole thing.
He plays a geek, but he plays a geek because he's a misfit and he's awkward. He's an awkward adolescent. And he's not the cool guy and he's not the best looking guy, but he's the guy that you automatically go to for sympathy in all these films. In Breakfast Club, we're not saying I'm Judd Nelson. We're saying I'm Anthony Michael Hall. That's who I am. I think even the Judd Nelsons of the world probably identify with Anthony Michael Hall in that film.
Like when I out him, I go, you've been with her? When I say, he says that you two, and then Molly turns on Michael for a moment, and he's still going to be my friend. You know what I mean? He's got a kind of confidence that there's nothing we can really do to hurt him. The only thing that can hurt him is himself. Michael is embarrassed. There's no doubt about it. They know each other. And it's not a bad thing, but he's embarrassed about it. But he realizes it right away when I make fun of him, and we all see him now having a cover. Then when he's upset that Molly says on Monday we're all going to be how we were, he's very believable when he says he would not do that. I believe him.
I just want to tell each of you that I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't, and I will not. Because I think that's real shitty.
And he shows us when he's nice to Carl on the way out.
She bragged? Yeah, come on.
No, that's actually, that's amazing. Yeah, you get the sense that him and Carl are buddies. Claire makes the most astute observation because she says, because you have nothing to prove, your friends idolize us or something like that. And then he says, which is true. He has nothing to lose by befriending them.
And I remember that little moment where I hit myself on the shoulder or something as if I'm doing a good job. Yeah, it is. It's cute. It's just a way to kind of wrap it up, and it's a way to give, the other two have sort of paired off.
He got the shaft in that sense. But he's also the smartest one, and he would have written the best letter. And so that's why it had to be him as well.
That was sort of Brian's department to take over there for everybody at the end, because the thought being that he's, excels as a student, but he's also sort of digested the group therapy aspects of it and is then assigned to write that letter at the end.
Emilio, to me, in The Breakfast Club, is the real sleeper of the character. There's something subtle and brewing about him that doesn't necessarily come off, even when you see the film for the first time. And I think that the more you see the film, the more you appreciate his performance, which I think is very subtle and good.
I think it's obvious that John Hughes' allegiance is with geeks. So I imagine, and this is just speculation on my part, but I imagine that it was challenging to write this sort of relatable jock. And he pulls it off. And you do feel for him. I like him.
Of the five who seemed so disconnected, to me, he seemed like the guy who made the most effort. He's kind of like the pivot man in the five of them, where he'd come to the defense of Molly Ringwald if Judd Nelson kind of said something inappropriate.
2 hits. Me hitting you, you hitting the floor.
I think he was very honest in the way he treated Ali Sheedy. She was being weird, and he'd say, "Why are you being so weird?"
Okay, fine. But I didn't dump my purse out on the couch and invite people into my problems.
More than any one of them, if you really think about when you first meet Andy, he's in the pickup truck with his dad, and his dad says,
"You want to miss a match? You want to blow your ride? I know school is going to give a scholarship to a discipline case."
He really doesn't say a whole lot, but you know immediately when he gets out of the truck and he slams the door you just kind of know immediately without him saying anything that that his dad is putting this pressure on him.
That may not ring as true to many people, but it does to athletes. They know exactly what he's talking about. It's just that elite athlete reveals him or herself a lot of times pretty early.
I expected a little more from a varsity letterman.
And the pressure begins on them that he's going to go to college because he's going to get a scholarship, without which he's not going to go to college. He's going to get a shit job, which means that maybe when I say, hey, Andy here is thinking about a job being in the custodial arts or whatever. And it's like that moment where it's like, hey, at least for me reading it, it's like you go, that's not a fun moment for Andy, and that pressure. And then why he's in there, tells this ridiculous story about taping a guy's butt cheeks together. I mean, it is ludicrous, but it happens. And he's so I think he's great in the movie.
Said I did it for my old man. I tortured this poor kid because I wanted him to think that I was cool.
He also had great energy and a great working spirit, and to the point where, in between takes, he'd be writing. I mean, the guy was on it.
The one thing that jumps out at me is Emilio Estevez kind of running around and singing, and he runs into a room and he screams and the window shatters. It's completely absurd. But somehow John Hughes manages to kind of weave in these absurd moments, and then still the movie makes perfect sense.
It's a movie, so you get to sometimes do things that are unlikely but not impossible. I mean, there was nothing done that was impossible in this movie.
He's using these devices that are more visual than expositional. But you understand exactly what Emilio Estevez is going through at that moment.
If Molly wasn't written in such a way in The Breakfast Club, and her background wasn't written in such a way, I wouldn't know what to draw from, basically. He gave the roadmap to the look. So she's a prissy girl. First, I wanted her to be like the rich little girl in pink and a little beret and, the diamond earrings, the little studs and little short skirt. And that was she was edgier than that. So then we went into that Ralph Lauren kind of straight wrap skirt with the boot, and it had attitude. Her clothes had an attitude. She had attitude.
Now, Molly, in front of her father, gives me an earring. So she's going to have to, she's choosing that road for herself, which is quite wonderful, because she and Daddy are not going to get along the next day. It's going to be good for me. So I'm okay with that.
I think that Molly gets really unfairly tarred with really owning that character in Breakfast Club too much. I mean, I think she was doing a lot of acting, and she brought a lot of herself to it. But Molly is very, very intuitive and subtle person, and she played that character to the hilt. Molly was just beyond her years. It never made any sense that Molly was, what was she, 16 when we were doing it? Molly never seemed like she was 16, ever. She's just beyond being a teenager, or she was back then, and now she's, I felt like she grew into herself in her 30s. It's sort of like Molly was always 30, and it never felt with Molly like, oh, Molly's, 5 years younger or whatever it was than the rest of us and still in school. It just seemed like, why is Molly in school, like that.
She is very shy, and she was throughout the making of those films. I mean, there's a certain, just a quietness, She kind of remains a little bit at a distance, but it's natural to her. It's not like an air, it's nothing that she's putting on in a way. She had really interesting eclectic tastes that weren't necessarily like a Southern California teenager that you would expect,
What's that?
Sushi.
Sushi?
Rice, raw fish, and seaweed.
In retrospect, you think back about, okay, that's raw fish for 4 hours sitting in a classroom. That's got to be nice.
When Judd came into the audition for The Breakfast Club, you probably heard the story, but he just came like the way you saw him in the film. I mean, he was in the jacket, he had the gloves, he had the ball, he had the boots, the you attitude, the whole thing.
I'm getting a little rambunctious, I think, in the waiting room outside. And the receptionist called for security. And so the elevator doors are opening with security just as someone opens the door from the side and goes, Judd Nelson? And I go, yeah, okay, yeah, it's me. So I go in and so it's like, I was a little bit adrenalized, I would say, that much yeah, okay, cops didn't get me.
When Judd walked in, he just had this sort of he had made this sort of method choice to just be like, I am Bender, and one of you guys are going to figure it out.
It's risky. It's a risky way to do it, but it just seemed to, certain roles, it's going to be hard for them to believe that you can pull it off if you're not already pulling it off.
With Judd Nelson's character, I mean, there was a point. If he came in the black leather jacket and too obvious, here he's wearing flannel, he's wearing a T-shirt underneath, he's got layers, he's got his boots that look horrible, he's got his awful pants, and that tweed overcoat. All his stuff was basically recycled. You make it look like it's been lived in, loved in, and his particular character totally works. People wanted that coat. People wanted to look like him. His attitude was perfect.
I like that other people started wearing the clothes because my mother has been giving me a hard time for a long time. What's with the boots? What, tying the shirt around your waist? Tuck it in, tie your shoelaces. It's like, Mom. She's like, you're a bad example. Kids are gonna fall. It's like, well, or better than being pushed, I guess,
The Seattle Sound copied the grunge look of Judd Nelson in The Breakfast Club, okay? That was him.
That was a changing moment for me because I did go out and buy a trench coat, and I put pins on it and I grew my hair and I wanted to get my ear pierced so some girl would give me her earring. In the way that I think I related to Andy's character as who I was, in that film, Judd Nelson was who I kind of wanted to be. It's a really great performance and again, it probably affected a lot of kids the way it affected me. You walk out of that experience a changed person.
The Breakfast Club actually does get pretty heightened. It gets pretty melodramatic. I mean, at one point, Bender is pacing through the library doing a monologue about being beaten. It's not super subtle, but it's effective. And I think that's why people love that movie, is because it's not afraid to go there.
I think he had to be big in order to come across as the rebel. His performance is a little bit bigger and more showy than everyone else's, but it needed to be.
See, this is what you get in my house when you spill paint in the garage.
Everything builds up to the moment where Molly Ringwald kisses him on the neck. That redeemed him completely in some way. He's, for the first time, completely not really sure what to do. He can't do anything. He can't tear anything apart or yell or curse. He's completely disarmed.
And then she gives me a gift, which is interesting. And I like that John has me take it. Because theoretically, after my big speech about, buying stuff, am I going to be so, no, take it. Don't be an ass. If for no other reason than, can talk to her, Monday, maybe.
I was really close to him back then because then during Breakfast Club, I just thought he was fantastic. And then we got to do St. Elmo's Fire, and then we did this movie that ended up being disastrous, but it was Blue City. I just, we're just really comfortable with each other.
And Judd definitely came ready in that role. I mean, he had a great passion and a focus then, because he knew he had landed a great role, and he delivered.
Allison was pretty exactly how I felt in high school. Allison is a part of me. I mean, that she didn't have to come from anywhere. I didn't have to find her.
She comes in this sort of coiled shell of a young woman, and she has these burning looks at people. She's an incredible actress. She's great.
And that's an incredible performance as well. Allie is she's so gifted, man.
Is it bad? Real bad? Your parents?
Yeah.
What did they do to you?
They ignore me.
When they ignore you, you're not even there. These are her parents. That's the closest family unit. So Allie was so wonderfully damaged. It's just she's so great. Allison, man, what a role.
I knew what I wanted her to look like because in high school, there wasn't really any goth stuff going on at all. I think that came after Breakfast Club, further along. But there were these girls that I really thought were incredibly hip and cool. And they were all the really pale-looking girls who hung out in coffee houses and listened to beat poetry, I thought that was really amazing. That's what I wanted Allison to look like. I really wanted that. And he let me do it. I mean, it was super pale and black eyeliner, and that's it, Done, over and out. It's great.
So we gave her that in the beginning, and the darkness. Her behavior was chewing her nails and spitting it out and just behaving so grossly. because she wanted to that kind of attention. And underneath everything was that little white camisole that showed this poor, fragile person who really wanted to be pretty and really wanted to be accepted that way. And that's how we were able to reveal her character.
I think Ali Sheedy's character definitely sells out. I never got the impression that her black stuff on her eyes, as Claire calls it, or her clothing or her tousled hair, I never got the impression that those were affectations. I thought that was genuinely her. I guess Allison should feel entitled to try on that persona if she wants to. But having been a very weird sort of black eyeliner wearing weird landscape drawing chick in high school, I felt slightly betrayed.
You really do look a lot better without all that black shit in your eyes. Hey, I like that black shit.
Yeah, I fall in the sellout camp. I do. I definitely do. She plays such an odd, individualistic kind of character, and then she becomes more conventional to me. But I never had a problem with it. I just thought it was another thing to talk about in relation to the movie. Whether what she does is considered a sellout or not, it actually seemed pretty real.
She didn't. She let Molly do something for her. That's what it really is about. And she even says, again, Hughes, like,
why are you being so nice to me? Because you're letting me?
Because you let me. It's so honest and so, a real connection. So we don't know if she's selling out. She's just letting Molly clean her up a little bit in that, high school way.
If you felt that was true, that Ali Sheedy sort of betrayed, who she was at the end of the film, I think you could say the same for every single one of them. Because they all go through some kind of evolution, some sort of change. Hers is a little bit more physical. I think it was just about everybody wants to be liked.
I did talk to John about it, and my thing was I didn't think that she should be somebody who has a whole bunch of makeup put on her face and then suddenly she's beautiful. So I wanted it to be, if we're going to do it, I wanted it to be that she, because she has all this stuff on her face, so it's white and all this eyeliner, that Molly would be taking it off. So it's kind of like, let's get rid of this mask or what, this thing that you've been playing, and this is what you really look like. That works. That's okay. I didn't think I needed to have a pink shirt on all of a sudden. I feel like I could have taken off my sweater and had like some kind of guy muscle tee or something, or she didn't have to take off her sweater. I mean, it was enough, just like stop hiding behind your hair. And, I felt like it went a little bit over the top.
John Hughes was not particularly charitable to public educators. Paul Gleason's character in The Breakfast Club is the principal who has not a leisure suit, but the 80s version.
Does Barry Manilow know that you raid his wardrobe?
One good thing about that character is that it's clear that he's in detention too. That by having to be there to discipline these kids on a Saturday, he has to be there as well. And he doesn't appear to have a lot to do at school that day either. It's a bad day for him.
Paul Gleason's a good actor, and he could play that role without turning it into a caricature, which I think is crucial to the success of that movie. Even though we all watched it identifying with the kids, on some level you have to believe that the adults are real, and he's real. We know that there are people like that, and that they have a heart somewhere, or you can be sympathetic to them, but you don't want to see them caricatured.
The adult characters are amazingly set up for the kids to bounce from and off of. And in Paul Gleason was the perfect character. My God, he's holding court. And then you could see the only authority this guy had was at school over these kids. And Judd was punching at it, kicking at it.
Paul was a great guy to have as like an adversary. He was great. And he brought so much to that as well, that looking at himself in the glass, the reflection of the fire extinguisher thing, like, hey, haga as he's walking on, it's like, he's so cocky.
Paul Gleason didn't have to ever try to be funny. He just was. I don't know who came up with that weird contraption on his desk. He's spinning something at some point. He was great.
And I'm gonna kick the living shit out of you, man. I'm gonna knock your dick in the dirt.
I really thought he was gonna whack me, and I would have taken it. I had to, And so I kind of flinched, and he didn't do anything, and he goes, I knew it. you're a gutless turd. I'm like, damn.
I mean, there's real anger in Paul's character that's palpable.
John asked me about casting, and he brought up Paul Gleason's name, and we'd both seen him in Trading Places. And there was this hilarious scene which he called to mind, which made us both laugh, where this old lady approaches him, and he's on the payphone, and she wanted to use the payphone. And he's just had this great kind of stern look that he could always like summon. And the lady comes up to the payphone, and he looks at her and he goes, "F off." And it's just like one of the funniest things ever.
Unbelievable. It's like, I went to my job. I was like, that's excellent. You know, Clarence Beeks, who ends up in that monkey suit.
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
These are characters that still exist, you know? They're not characters that only existed in 1984. These are the kind of people that are still in high school.
So you just stripped to the things that you know. Shopping, nail polish, your father's BMW, and your poor, rich, drunk mother in the Caribbean. Shut up! And as far as being concerned about what's gonna happen when you and I walk down the hallways of school, you can forget it, because it's never gonna happen. Just bury your head in the sand and wait for your prom.
I hate you.
Yeah? Good.